Ava Carter never imagined her life would take this turn. At 24, she had dreamed of building a career, traveling the world, and living on her own terms. But reality had other plans. Her father, Richard Carter, once a promising businessman, was drowning in debt. And when the Alfayez family came with an offer too good to refuse, everything changed. The proposal was simple: an arranged marriage between Ava and Zaid Alfayez, the heir to a multi-billion-dollar Middle Eastern empire. In return, her family's financial troubles would disappear. Her mother saw it as a blessing. Her father called it an opportunity, but Ava felt only one thing: fear. That night, she met Zaid for the first time. The dinner was set in a private room of one of New York's most exclusive restaurants. As she stepped inside, her eyes swept over the luxurious space. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and silent waiters moved with trays of dishes she couldn't even name. But none of that caught her attention more than the man sitting in front of her, Zaid Al-Fayez. He was younger than she expected, maybe 28, his features sharp and striking. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his tailored suit fit him flawlessly. But what surprised her the most wasn't his appearance. It was the fact that he was sitting in a wheelchair. His gaze met hers, and for a moment, Ava felt as if he could read every thought running through her mind. "Were you expecting something else?" Zaid was the first to speak, his voice deep, carrying a faint Arabic accent. Ava blinked, caught off guard. "What? You looked surprised. I assumed they hadn't told you that I'm a lost cause." A smirk touched his lips, but there was no humor in it. Ava hesitated. It was true. No one had explained the details of Zaid's condition. She knew he had been in an accident, but she hadn't realized it meant he would never walk again. I didn't know," she admitted quietly. Zaid let out a short, dry laugh. "Of course not. They only told you about the money, didn't they?" The silence between them grew heavy. Ava felt her chest tighten. She didn't want to be here. She didn't want her future decided by a contract between families. But as she looked into Zaid's eyes, she saw something unexpected. He didn't want this either. Maybe at that dinner, Ava had met someone who understood her desperation more than anyone else in the world. But that didn't mean she would stay. The engagement was finalized within a week. Ava barely had time to process what was happening before she found herself trapped in a whirlwind of fittings, meetings, and endless discussions about wedding details. It was as if her life was no longer hers to control. The Al-Fayez family wasted no time in asserting their influence. They had flown Ava and her parents to their private estate in New York, a towering penthouse overlooking Central Park. The moment she stepped inside, she realized she had entered a different world, a world where luxury wasn't just a privilege, but an expectation. The furniture was imported from Europe, the marble floors gleamed under the chandelier lights, and the air smelled of fresh jasmine, subtly infused into the ventilation system. But despite the beauty, Ava felt suffocated. Zaid, on the other hand, seemed completely indifferent. He had barely spoken to her since their first dinner, only appearing at formal events where they had to smile for the cameras. And yet, something about him intrigued her. One evening, as she wandered through the penthouse, she heard music drifting from one of the rooms, the soft, haunting notes of a piano. She followed the sound and found Zaid alone in a dimly lit lounge, his fingers gliding effortlessly over the keys. She hesitated before stepping inside. "I didn't know you played." Zaid didn't stop playing, but he smirked slightly. "There are a lot of things you don't know about me." Ava leaned against the doorframe. "Oh, like what?" This time, he did stop. He turned his wheelchair slightly to face her, his dark eyes studying her as if deciding whether she was worth his time. "Like the fact that this marriage isn't about me." Ava frowned. "What do you mean?" Zaid exhaled, running a hand through his hair. My parents need to show the world that I'm still a worthy heir. A wife, especially an American one, helps with that image. And your family needs money. It's a convenient arrangement. His words stung, even though she already knew the truth. So, that's all I am to you? A convenient arrangement, she asked. Zaid's expression was unreadable. Isn't that all I am to you? Silence settled between them. For a brief second, Ava saw something behind his guarded exterior, a flicker of resentment, maybe even sadness, but just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Zaid turned back to the piano and resumed playing, effectively dismissing her. Ava walked away with a sinking realization. She wasn't marrying a stranger, she was marrying a prisoner, just like herself. Ava had spent her entire life believing that money solved everything. Now, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, she realized how wrong she was. The Alfayez estate in New York was a palace disguised as a penthouse. Every detail, from the hand-carved wooden panels to the imported silk curtains, screamed luxury. But beneath the perfection, there were cracks. And those cracks became more visible every time she was alone with Zaid. He was always polite, but distant, cold even. At public events, they played their roles perfectly, the charming billionaire heir and his beautiful fiancée. But behind closed doors, it was like they lived in two separate worlds. One night, after yet another exhausting gala, Ava found herself outside on the penthouse balcony, staring at the New York skyline. The city lights stretched endlessly before her, but instead of feeling free, she felt trapped. "Are you planning to jump?" She turned sharply. Zaid was behind her, his wheelchair barely making a sound as he moved closer. "What?" she asked, startled. He smirked, but there was no real humor in it. "You looked deep in thought. Or thought I'd check if I needed to call security." Ava crossed her arms. "Funny, maybe you should be the one worrying about escaping." Zaid tilted his head, studying her. "You think I haven't tried?" Something about the way he said it sent a chill down her spine. Ava hesitated before asking, "Why are you really in that wheelchair?" Zaid's smirk disappeared instantly. His fingers tightened on the armrests of his chair. "I was in a car accident," he said, his tone flat. "That's what they say," she countered, watching his reaction closely. "But I don't think you believe that." For the first time since she met him, Zaid looked vulnerable. He exhaled slowly, as if debating whether to tell her the truth. Finally, he spoke. "I don't remember the accident. At least, not the way I should." Ava frowned. "What do you mean?" Zaid turned his gaze toward the skyline. "I was driving alone at night. I remember being on the road, but then nothing. No skid marks, no warning. Just me waking up in a hospital, paralyzed from the waist down." Ava swallowed hard. "You think someone caused it?" He didn't answer right away. Then, in a low voice, he said, "I think someone wanted me out of the way." The weight of his words settled heavily between them. For the first time, Ava realized she wasn't just marrying into wealth and power. She was stepping into something much darker. Ava couldn't sleep that night. Zaid's words echoed in her mind. "I think someone wanted me out of the way." She had walked into this engagement believing it was just about money and image. But now, there was something more, something dangerous, and she was right in the middle of it. The next morning, she moved through the penthouse as if in a daze. The Alfayez estate no longer felt like a luxurious home. It felt like a prison. The security, the watchful eyes of the staff, the way she was never truly alone. It all seemed more sinister now. She needed to leave, but how? She sat on the edge of her bed, gripping her phone. Calling her parents was useless. They had already made their choice. They saw this marriage as her duty, and the Alfayez family had made one thing clear. Once she was in, there was no way out. Her only option was to run. That night, she gathered what little she could, a bag with cash, her passport, and a change of clothes. She had memorized the security routines, noting the few moments when the guards were distracted. If she timed it right, she could slip out through the service exit and disappear into the city. Her heart pounded as she zipped up her bag. But before she could take a step, there was a knock on the door. She froze. Ava. It was Zaid. His voice was calm, but firm. "Open the door." She hesitated, then slowly turned the handle. Zaid wheeled himself inside, his dark eyes scanning the bag on the bed. He didn't look surprised. "You're leaving," he stated. Ava swallowed. "I can't stay here." Zaid exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "You really think you can just walk away?" "I have to try." For a long moment, Zaid just looked at her. Then, to her shock, he said, "Take me with you." Ava blinked. "What?" "You're not the only one who wants out." His voice was quiet but steady. "If you run alone, they'll find you. But if we leave together, we might have a chance." Ava stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. She had planned to escape from Zaid. Now, she had to decide if she could escape with him. Ava never imagined she would be running from her own wedding. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her white silk gown, her heart pounding so hard it drowned out the wedding music playing in the grand ballroom below. Guests had already arrived, hundreds of them. Business tycoons, politicians, royals from the Middle East, every powerful connection the Al-Fayez family had was here to witness this union. And yet, here she was, standing in a private dressing room, about to run. Zaid sat in his wheelchair near the window, watching as she paced back and forth. He was already dressed in his tailored tuxedo, his expression unreadable. "We have 10 minutes before they come looking for us," he said. Ava swallowed hard. "This is insane." "Probably." She turned to face him. "I don't even know if I can trust you." Zaid leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You think I trust you? You were going to leave me behind." Ava had no argument. That had been the plan. But everything changed the moment Zaid asked her to take him with her. "If we do this, there's no turning back," she said. "I know." She inhaled sharply, gripping the handle of the small bag she had hidden under the dressing table. "Then let's go." The escape was planned down to the second. Ava had memorized the security rotations. There was a 2-minute window where the guards at the service entrance switched shifts, leaving a blind spot. If they reached the back exit in time, they could slip out unnoticed. Zaid moved fast, his wheelchair gliding smoothly across the polished floors. Ava walked beside him, her gown making it difficult to move quickly. Every step felt like a countdown to disaster. Then, as they reached the hallway leading to the service door, a voice rang out behind them. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" Ava's breath caught in her throat. It was Omar Al-Fayez, Zaid's older brother, tall, broad-shouldered, and radiating authority. Omar had always been the enforcer of the family. He was the one who handled problems. And right now, Ava and Zaid were his biggest problem. "Step away from him, Ava," Omar commanded. "This wedding is happening." Zaid's hands tightened on his wheels. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Omar let out a low laugh. "You don't. That's the whole point." Ava's heart pounded. If they didn't move now, they would never get out. "Run!" Zaid said suddenly. "What? Go, Ava!" She hesitated for half a second, then turned and sprinted down the hallway. She heard Omar curse behind her, followed by the sound of Zaid's wheelchair spinning around, but she couldn't stop. She burst through the service exit and into the alley behind the building. A taxi was waiting just like she had arranged. She yanked open the door, gasping for breath, but as she looked back, expecting Zaid to follow, he wasn't there. Ava's pulse pounded in her ears as she sat in the back seat of the taxi, staring at the empty alleyway. Zaid wasn't there. For a moment, she couldn't move. Her breath came in sharp gasps, her hands gripping the fabric of her wedding dress. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. He was supposed to be with her. "Miss, are you getting in or not?" the driver asked impatiently. Ava's mind raced. If she waited any longer, someone would find her. She had no choice. Slamming the door shut, she forced herself to speak. "Drive." The taxi sped off, merging into the heavy New York traffic. Ava kept her head low, trying to steady her breathing. She had escaped the wedding, but she wasn't free yet. The Alfayez family had resources, power, and influence. If they wanted to find her, they would. And worst of all, she had left Zaid behind. 30 minutes later, the taxi pulled up to a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. Ava paid the driver in cash, grabbed her bag, and rushed inside. The receptionist barely looked up as he handed her a key. Inside the small, dimly lit room, she locked the door and collapsed onto the bed. Her wedding dress felt suffocating, a cruel reminder of everything she had just run from. She ripped off the veil, her hands shaking. What had happened to Zaid? Had Omar stopped him? Had he let her go on purpose? Ava reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over Zaid's contact, but before she could call, a loud knock at the door. Her heart stopped. She froze, every muscle in her body tense. Another knock, more forceful this time. She swallowed hard, creeping toward the door as quietly as she could. Peering through the peephole, her breath caught. Zaid. His hair was disheveled, his tuck slightly wrinkled, but he was there, alive, alone. Ava yanked open the door. Zaid! Before she could say another word, he pushed his way inside and slammed the door behind him. "Pack your things," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to leave, now." Ava's pulse spiked. "What happened? How did you get away?" Zaid's jaw clenched. "Omar let me go." She stared at him. "What? Why would he?" "Because he wants me to think I escaped." Zaid's dark eyes locked onto hers. "But we're not free, Ava. Not yet." A chill ran down her spine. Omar wasn't trying to stop them. He was hunting them. Ava's mind screamed, "Run." She threw a wad of cash at the driver. "Stop the car." He hesitated but obeyed. The moment the taxi halted, Ava bolted out, darting into a crowded street. She pushed through people, ignoring their protests. The SUV screeched to a stop behind her. She ran. Her wedding dress was a nightmare to move in, so she ripped the bottom half off, leaving it in shreds as she weaved through alleyways. Her phone buzzed again. "You can't hide." Ava's chest tightened. Then, out of nowhere, a hand grabbed her arm. She spun, ready to fight, but froze when she saw who it was. Zaid. He was out of breath, his wheelchair abandoned a few feet away. He had dragged himself to her, his hands scraped and bleeding from the asphalt. "What the hell are you doing?" she whispered, pulling him up. Zaid clenched his jaw. "Saving your life." Ava helped him back into his chair, her heart still racing. "How did you find me?" I found them." He pointed toward the SUV. "And I knew they'd lead me straight to you." Ava's blood ran cold. "Who are they?" Zaid looked her dead in the eyes. "Not my family." Her stomach twisted. "Then who?" "The people who tried to kill me." Ava's world tilted. Everything she thought she knew about Zaid, about this marriage, had just shattered. And now she was caught in something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Ava felt like the ground beneath her had vanished. "The people who tried to kill you," she repeated, barely able to process Zaid's words. Zaid clenched his jaw. "Yes, and now they're after you too." Ava swallowed hard. She had been running from one prison, only to fall into another. Who the hell had she married into? The black SUV was still there, idling at the curb. The windows were tinted, but she could feel eyes watching them. Zaid grabbed her wrist. "We need to move, now." Ava hesitated. "Where?" "Somewhere they won't follow." He wheeled himself toward a side alley. Ava followed, her mind racing. They had no plan, no money, just the certainty that if they stayed, they wouldn't make it out alive. The city swallowed them as they disappeared into the chaos of the streets. 30 minutes later, they were inside a dimly lit apartment. It smelled like old books and coffee, and the walls were covered in conspiracy theories and newspaper clippings. A man stood in front of them, arms crossed. Noah Pierce, investigative journalist, the only person Zaid trusted. Noah scanned Ava up and down, then turned to Zaid. "You didn't tell me you were bringing company." "She's part of this now," Zaid said flatly. "She needs to know everything." Ava crossed her arms. "Then start talking." Noah sighed and pulled out a folder. He tossed it onto the table. "This is what I've got so far." Ava hesitated before opening it. The first thing she saw was a crime scene photo, a black sports car, wrecked beyond recognition. Zaid's car. She looked up at him, but he gave no reaction. Noah pointed at the image. The accident wasn't random. The brakes were cut. Someone wanted Zaid dead. Ava's stomach twisted. "And you think it was his family?" Noah shook his head. "That's the thing. The Al-Fayez family may be ruthless, but they wouldn't kill their own heir. This goes deeper." Zaid leaned forward. "Then who?" Noah hesitated before flipping to the next page. It was a surveillance photo, 2 men in suits, standing near a luxury car. "These guys," Noah tapped the picture. "They work for an organization that operates behind the scenes, using wealthy families like the Al-Fayez as pawns." Ava's breath caught. "Why would they want Zaid dead?" Noah looked at Zaid. "Because he wasn't supposed to inherit anything." Zaid's expression darkened. "What the hell are you talking about?" Noah sighed. "You weren't the chosen heir, Zaid. Omar was." Silence. Ava glanced at Zaid, watching as his hands curled into fists. "Omar knew," he muttered, realization dawning on his face. "He knew and didn't stop it." Noah nodded. "And now that you're still alive, they're trying to finish what they started." Ava's heart pounded. This wasn't just about a broken engagement. This was about survival. She turned to Zaid. "What do we do?" He exhaled slowly. Then, for the first time since they met, he looked at her not as a burden, but as a partner. "We fight back." Ava had never thought of herself as someone who would go to war with billionaires and criminals. But here she was. Zaid sat across from her, his jaw tense. The revelation that his own brother had known about the assassination attempt burned in his eyes. Noah paced the room. "We don't have much time. If they know you two are together, they'll come for you soon." Ava clenched her fists. "So, what do we do?" Noah placed a flash drive on the table. "We expose them." She and Zaid leaned in as Noah opened his laptop and pulled up a series of financial records, confidential emails, and hidden transactions. "This," Noah said, pointing at the screen, "connects Omar Al-Fayez and his allies to offshore accounts linked to the organization that tried to kill Zaid." Zaid's eyes narrowed. "This is enough to destroy them." Noah nodded. "But getting this out won't be easy. These people control the media, the police, hell, even governments. If you go public, you need to be ready for the fallout." Ava took a deep breath. "What's the alternative? Keep running forever?" Zaid met her gaze. He had spent years trapped, not just in his wheelchair, but in a family that saw him as disposable. Running wasn't an option anymore. He straightened in his chair. "We leak everything." Tonight, 12 hours later, the world exploded. At exactly midnight, Noah uploaded the files to multiple news outlets, whistleblower forums, and social media. Within minutes, Noah Al-Fayez's scandal was trending worldwide. A billionaire empire linked to organized crime. Omar Al-Fayez, accused of murder, plot against brother. Shocking leaks exposed corruption among the global elite. The internet was on fire. Reporters swarmed the Al-Fayez estate. Investors pulled their funding. The family's reputation, carefully built over generations, was crumbling in real time. Then came the call. Zaid's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then answered, "Omar." Silence. Then a slow exhale. "You have no idea what you've done." Omar's voice was low, controlled, but filled with something dangerous. Zaid tightened his grip on the phone. "Oh, I do. I just don't care anymore." Omar chuckled. "This isn't over." Click. The call ended. Ava looked at Zaid. "He's not going to let this go, is he?" Zaid exhaled. "No, but now the whole world is watching. He can't touch us without making it worse for himself. Ava wasn't so sure. Men like Omar didn't give up, and something told her this wasn't the end. The storm that followed was unlike anything Ava had ever seen. The Al-Fayez family was collapsing under the weight of the scandal. News outlets dissected every detail: illegal dealings, offshore accounts, and worst of all, the attempted murder of Zaid. Omar had gone into hiding. His powerful allies were scrambling to distance themselves. Arrest warrants were issued. The empire their family had built for generations was burning. And yet, Ava didn't feel safe. She and Zaid had been in a safe house for days, watching everything unfold. But she knew men like Omar didn't just disappear. He had money, power, and most of all, revenge on his mind. One evening, as she sat by the window, lost in thought, Zaid rolled his wheelchair closer. "You regret it?" he asked. She turned to face him. "What?" "Running. Exposing everything." Ava studied him for a moment. In the beginning, she had been forced into this life, an arranged marriage to a man she barely knew, trapped in a world that wasn't hers. But now she was standing beside Zaid because she chose to. "No," she said softly. "Do you?" Zaid let out a short laugh. "I thought I would. My entire life, I did what my family wanted. Even after the accident, I still played their game," he exhaled. "But for the first time, I don't feel like a prisoner." Ava smiled faintly. "So, what now?" Zaid's expression grew serious. "We disappear, start over." She hesitated. "Just like that." He nodded. "The Al-Fayez name is toxic now. There's nothing left for me there. And Omar," his jaw tightened. "He'll come for me one day, but I won't be easy to find." Ava's chest tightened. She had expected this, but hearing it out loud made it real. She looked at him carefully. "And me?" Zaid held her gaze. "That's up to you." Silence stretched between them. A choice lay before her. She could walk away, go back to her old life, one that would be safer, simpler, or she could stay with the man she was supposed to marry, the man who had once been a stranger, but now felt like something more. Ava took a deep breath. "Let's go." Zaid studied her for a long moment, then nodded. No more cages, no more running, just a new beginning. Months later, somewhere in Europe, a woman walked through a quiet cafe, placing 2 cups of coffee on a table. "We're all over the news again," Ava said, setting her phone down. Across from her, Zaid smirked. "Still," she handed him the coffee. "Omar was arrested this morning." Zaid took a slow sip. "Good." Ava sat beside him, watching people pass by outside. They had new names now, new identities, no longer bound to the past. She glanced at Zaid. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I never ran?" He chuckled. "You mean if you actually married me?" Ava smirked. "Technically, we're still engaged." Zaid raised an eyebrow. "Is that right?" She shrugged playfully. "I don't see a ring on my finger yet." Zaid set his cup down and leaned in slightly. "Ava Carter, are you proposing to me?" She laughed. "I guess you'll have to stick around and find out." Zaid shook his head, smiling. For the first time in a long time, the future was theirs to decide.